Today on Network Africa, an Islamist militant tenders apology in court asking for forgiveness for the destruction of some historical sites in Timbuktu, Mali. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry begins his Africa tour. First stop is Kenya. Then a new study finds that doctors this part of the world have been encouraging the abuse of antibiotics with their prescriptions. Network Africa begins right now. Hello everyone, I am Amarachi Ubani. It's not every day you get an apology at The Hague. In fact, there are hardly ever any. But it happened during a landmark trial of Ahmed Al-Faki Al-Mahdi, who is accused of leading rebel forces who destroyed historical shrines at the World Heritage Site in Mali in 2012. Al-Mahdi was said to have been a member of Ansar Dine, an Islamist group that occupied Timbuktu for months. They believe the shrines and city's ancient manuscripts, covering everything from history to astronomy, is idolatrous. Court documents describe Mahdi as a religious scholar who directed fighters to wreck several sites with pickaxes and chisels after failing to deter locals from praying at them. He was charged with war crimes over the destruction of 9 mausoleums and a mosque. In court today, he pleaded guilty and said the words no one expected to hear. Mahdi said, and I quote here, "I am really sorry, I'm really remorseful, and I regret all the damage that my actions have caused." Given his guilty plea, the trial will probably be over by the end of this week. He faces a maximum sentence of 30 years in jail. Timbuktu is famous for its distinctive mud and wood architecture. It was center of Islamic learning between the 13th and 17th centuries and was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1988. Ansar Dine, however, is an extremist militia with roots in the nomadic Tuareg people. It has ties with Al-Qaeda and was eventually driven out of Mali in a French-led intervention in 2013. Security expert Dr. Onai Komo joins us now to discuss Al-Mahdi's apology. Well, he will be joining us much later, I believe. But it's hard to decipher whether Al-Mahdi was being sincere at The Hague today. But he had a message, though, for other militants and probably his colleagues. He said, "I would like to give a piece of advice to all Muslims in the world not to get involved in the same acts I got involved in, because they're not going to lead to any good for humanity." End of quote. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is due in Nigeria at least by this evening, continuing his Africa tour. During his visit to Nigeria, he will be holding meetings with President Muhammadu Buhari and northern governors. He is expected in Sokoto and Abuja, where he'll be discussing counter-terrorism efforts, the Nigerian economy, the fight against corruption and human rights issues. Right now, Mr. Kerry is in Kenya, meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta to discuss regional security. He will also be discussing fighting in South Sudan and the situation in Somalia, where militant group Islamist Al-Shabaab continues to launch attacks. Moving on now, there are other stories that we have today. A study published in the BMC Public Health Journal revealing that doctors in sub-Saharan Africa are prescribing more drugs than the number recommended by the World Health Organization. The researchers from the University of London and Ghana's Health Policy Consult reviewed dozens of studies on drug prescription in 11 sub-Saharan African countries and found that every time a patient sees a doctor, an average of 3 drugs are prescribed. The WHO recommends a maximum of 2 per hospital visit. The researchers say this finding points to a growing trend called polypharmacy, where patients are given multiple drugs which can lead to adverse reactions between different medicines, errors in dispensing, or cause the user to confuse dosage. Researchers also found that half the time, one is likely to be given an antibiotic, often without being tested. This practice was found to be more common in profit-making institutions where financial incentives are thought to influence over prescription. Dr. Marian Ngwola, a health expert, joins us now to talk about this. Dr. Marian, if you're on the line, would you please join us on the show? What do you make of this new study?
The report, for me, is quite interesting, and it is really a kind of call for attention and for action. It's raising it in an alarm, because anywhere we talk about over-prescription of antibiotics, it has many consequences. So it is important to take note and to have appropriate action towards the training and the post-training of our medical doctor and health professionals, both from pharmacists level than for hospital.
Could it be that antibiotics really are being abused in this part of the world?
Yes, and we have, it has translated today in a difficulty to have efficacy antibiotics. We know that today, all over the world, we have observed resistance of the bacteria against the antibiotics used. And one of the major causes was the abuse and misuse of the antibiotics, because it is prescribed without proper. We don't know exactly that this antibiotic is fit for this bacteria, and also the way people are using it, either they don't take the full dosage, which makes the bacteria more resistant. So it is really a problem that we have observed all over the world, because even in the developed world today, we know that in hospitals there is more and more difficulties to have treatment of antibiotics.
Doctor, why do you think the focus is on Africa, considering that antibiotics, as you said, could be abused in other parts of the world as well?
And I think the focus in Africa is because, unfortunately, in Africa, the prescription does not always follow the proper diagnostic, the proper test, because we don't have the facility as far as a laboratory is concerned, and we don't have it all over, all around. All outside Africa, in the more developed world, before any prescription of antibiotics, they go for tests to confirm just what is being asked and required for people. When you have fever, they ask you to make sure that it is malaria, so that you take the appropriate drug. But the facilities are not available in Africa. Therefore, people are going with it, and because we want most of the time a rapid effect, we prescribe randomly most of the time antibiotics without the proper confirmation of the specific bacteria that require a specific antibiotic.
Doctor, are there other side effects of the use of antibiotics?
Well, yes, as I earlier mentioned, overuse of antibiotics are translating to resistance. That is what we are seeing all over the places. Because once you use too much, of course, and then you just appropriate, the bacteria has to defend itself and then start becoming resistant to the antibiotics, and it becomes more and more difficult to have efficacy and then to have the results that we are looking for. So it is very important to, while we are educating the people, we are also educating the health system, and then we are doing our basic tests to strengthen the health system. We have been talking about it, and it's something that the government in Africa, generally speaking, has to look after to ensure that we have adequate facilities at every level of the society and the community, so that we have appropriate diagnosis and then prescription of the appropriate drugs.
Dr. Ngwola, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. Still ahead, we have more stories making headlines here on the continent. Do join us again.